the brother of King Henry VIII, Arthur Tudor, Prince of Wales. Henry VII rose to power in England following his victory over Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485. To strengthen his claim to the throne, Henry and his royal advisers traced his ancestry back to ancient British rulers. In a symbolic move, they named his first son after the legendary King Arthur and identified Camlet as present-day Winchester. Henry's wife, Elizabeth of York, gave birth to their son in Winchester, further cementing the connection to Arthurian legend. Now, let's explore the life of Arthur Tudor, the Prince of Wales. Arthur was born on the 20th of September 1486 at St. Swithin's Priory, as the eldest child of Henry and Elizabeth. He symbolised the unity between the House of Tudor and the House of York, marking the end of the Wars of Roses. Arthur also inherited the title of Duke of Cornwall at birth. His baptism at Winchester Cathedral was confirmation by Bishop John Alcock, marked his formal entry into the royal family. Notable figures such as John de Vere, Thomas Stanley, and Queen Elizabeth Woodville were among his godparents. Initially, Arthur was cared for by Elizabeth Darcy, who had previously served Edward IV's children. Upon becoming Prince of Wales in 1490, Arthur had his own household, reflecting his royal status. Henry VII and Elizabeth had 6 more children, but only Margaret, Henry, and Mary survived to adulthood. Arthur shared a strong bond with his siblings, especially Margaret and Henry. Arthur's journey into knighthood began in 1489, when he was made a Knight of the Bath. He was formally appointed Prince of Wales and Earl of Chester in 1490 at the Palace of Westminster. His ceremony included a grand procession down the River Thames, and Arthur was also inducted into the Order of the Garter at St George's Chapel in Windsor Palace in 1491. Alongside his formal education, Arthur excelled in activities like archery and dance under esteemed tutors. By 1501, it was widely believed that Arthur's supposed frail health, which had been discussed since 1502, was actually a misunderstanding of a letter from that year. However, there are no contemporary accounts of Arthur being in poor health. As he grew up, Arthur was recognised for his remarkably tall stature for his age and was considered handsome by the Spanish court. He bore a resemblance to his brother Henry, known for his striking looks, sharing features like reddish hair, small eyes, and a prominent nose. Despite being perceived as delicate overall, Arthur's friendly and gentle nature garnered him admiration. In May 1490, Arthur was appointed as the warden, responsible for the security of the border between England and Scotland, overseeing all the marches towards Scotland, with the Earl of Surrey acting as his deputy. He began participating in peace commissions from 1491, and when his father travelled to France in October 1492, Arthur took on the duties of Keeper of England and King's Lieutenant. Following the example of Edward IV, Henry VII established a Council of Wales and the marches to assert royal authority in the area, appointing Arthur as its leader. Although the council had been created in 1490, Jasper Tudor, the Duke of Bedford, formally headed it. Arthur was sent to Wales in 1501 at the age of 15 to further consolidate royal control. In March 1493, Arthur was granted the authority to appoint justices of Oyer and Termina, empowering the council to handle legal matters and investigate franchises. He received support from members of the English, Irish, and Welsh nobility, including Gerald Fitzgerald, the 9th Earl of Kildare, who had been brought to the English court due to his father's involvement in the crowning of Lambert Simnel during Henry VII's reign. Regarding marriage, Henry VII intended to strengthen the Anglo-Spanish alliance against France by marrying Arthur to a daughter of the Catholic monarchs Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon. Catherine, the youngest daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, was proposed as a suitable match for Arthur. The Treaty of Medina de Campo in March 1489 outlined their marriage once they reached marriageable age, with Catherine's dowry set at 200,000 crowns. The marriage was granted in February 1497, and a proxy marriage took place on the 25th of August. 2 years later, a formal proxy marriage was conducted at Arthur's Tickenhill Manor in Bewdley, near Worcester. In a letter from October 1499, Arthur expressed his deep affection for Catherine, eagerly anticipating their union and referring to her as his beloved spouse. Until the 20th of September 1501, Arthur and Catherine communicated in Latin. But upon turning 15, Arthur was considered old enough for marriage. Catherine arrived in England on the 2nd of October, and they met for the first time on November the 4th at Dogmas Field in Hampshire. Despite Arthur's pledge to be a devoted husband, they faced difficulties in understanding each other due to differences in their Latin pronunciation. Despite these linguistic hurdles, Catherine arrived in London on the 9th of November. The wedding took place on the 14th, 1501, at St. Paul's Cathedral, with both adorned in white satin. The ceremony was conducted by Henry VIII, Archbishop of Canterbury. The newlyweds were then entertained at Baynard's Castle. Following the ceremony, a traditional wedding ceremony organised by Arthur's grandmother, Lady Margaret, took place. Catherine was led to the bridal chamber, where she was prepared and placed in bed, joined by Arthur. After a month at Tickenhill Manor, Arthur and Catherine moved to Ludlow Castle in Wales. Despite initial reluctance from Henry VII, Catherine was ordered to join Arthur. Under Arthur's governance, Wales experienced peace, yet tragedy struck in March 1502 when they both fell ill. Catherine recovered, but Arthur passed away on the 2nd of April 1502. Arthur's death deeply affected Henry VII, who summoned his wife for solace. Elizabeth was overwhelmed with grief, as seen during the procession for Arthur's soul salvation on the 8th of April, and the subsequent services in London. Arthur's body was transported to Worcester Cathedral on the 25th of April, with Catherine not attending the funeral. Discussions arose about betrothing Catherine to the new heir, Henry, with the Pope granting a dispensation. Henry VIII ascended the throne on the 22nd of April 1509 and married Catherine on the 11th of June. They had 6 children, but only Mary survived. Despite Henry's later desire to annul the marriage, Catherine maintained her innocence. Arthur's premature death marked the beginning of significant changes, with Henry VIII's reign altering England's course. Despite Arthur's brief life, his legacy remains shrouded in mystery, leaving many historians with many unanswered questions. The overlooked brother of King Henry VIII. During the Tudor era, childbirth posed significant risks for both the mother and the child. Numerous notable individuals such as Catherine Parr and Elizabeth of York tragically passed away shortly after the birth. It was distressingly common for infants to fall ill and perish in the early stages of life, which caused immense sorrow for the parents. One such overlooked figure is Edmund, the forgotten Tudor prince and younger brother of Henry VIII. Securing heirs, particularly sons, was crucial for Tudor monarchs like Henry VII and Henry VIII to ensure the continuation of their dynasties. Henry VIII's relentless pursuit of a male heir led to very drastic actions, including the execution of his second wife, Anne Boleyn. Despite being a fertile couple, Elizabeth of York and Henry VII experienced the heartbreak of losing children in infancy, including Edmund, the Duke of Somerset. In the summer of 1497, after the birth of Princess Mary Tudor, Queen Elizabeth embarked on a pilgrimage in the hopes of conceiving another royal child with her husband. However, at the age of 33, her chances of pregnancy were reduced in Tudor England. The kingdom faced instability due to uprisings and even a fire at Chene Palace in the Christmas of 1497. Despite these challenges, by May of the following year, Queen Elizabeth was pregnant once again. She received the best medical care available at the time, but the pregnancy was very difficult on her. Following tradition, Elizabeth entered confinement at Greenwich Palace in February 1499. Surrounded by her closest attendants, she gave birth to a healthy son, the sixth child of Henry VII and Elizabeth, on the 21st of February 1499. After the birth, the Queen experienced a complication, possibly childbed fever, causing concern for her husband. However, she managed to recover, and the announcement of the new prince's birth was met with widespread celebration across England, marked by very grand ceremonies. The baptism took place on the 24th of February at the Church of the Observant Friars near Greenwich Palace, with a silver front brought from Canterbury Cathedral. Lavish decorations adorned the church, commemorating this historic event, and the baby was named Edmund after his grandfather Edmund Tudor, Earl of Richmond. Margaret, the child's godmother, bestowed a significant sum of £100 upon him, along with financial rewards for the nurses and midwife. Shortly after his birth, Edmund was granted the Duke of Somerset, a title previously held by members of the Beaufort family. This title would later be inherited by Edward Seymour, Lord Protector of Henry VIII's son, Edward VI. Edmund spent his early days in the royal nursery at Eltham Palace, alongside his siblings Margaret, Mary and Henry, the future Henry VIII. Despite the privileged upbringing, tragedy struck in the summer of 1500 with a deadly plague outbreak in England. To safeguard the children, including Edmund, they were relocated from Eltham Palace to the more remote Old Palace at Hatfield in Hertfordshire, while their parents travelled to Calais. The palace, a large red brick structure, served as a temporary refuge from the plague. However, on the 16th of June, upon the King and Queen's return to England, they received devastating news. Prince Edmund had passed away at Hatfield. The cause of his death remains uncertain, possibly due to an illness like the plague, or cot death, which was sudden infant death syndrome. The grieving royal couple spared no expense in arranging for his burial. Records indicate that £242 was allocated for Prince Edmund's burial. He received a grand state funeral, with his small body interred in a new chest adorned with white damask and a red velvet cross, along with his effigy and princely circlet. The coffin, accompanied by the effigy, was transported from Hatfield to London in a chariot, draped in black cloth, drawn by 6 horses, which were also adorned with the same black cloth. Edward Stafford, the Duke of Buckingham, led the procession as chief mourner, followed by nobles and lords with torchbearers lighting the route. The Lord Mayor of London and thousands of citizens lined the streets to pay their respects. King Henry, dressed in mourning attire, awaited the coffin at Westminster Abbey, possibly accompanied by the Queen. The coffin was solemnly brought into the abbey on a hearse, where monks and lords maintained vigil over it. Mass was held on the 22nd of June, and the coffin was laid to rest inside the Confessors' Chapel at Westminster Abbey. Unfortunately, there is no record or monument or tomb marking Edward's burial site. Edmund Tudor, the overlooked Tudor prince and son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, met a tragic and abrupt end. It's likely that the royal family held high hopes for his future, envisioning him as a prosperous prince who would support his brother's reign and forge alliances through marriage. His untimely death was undoubtedly a profound loss for Henry VII and Elizabeth, foreshadowing further tragedy. Within 2 years of Edmund's passing, Elizabeth of York fell gravely ill following childbirth and succumbed to complications inside the Tower of London. Her death shattered the king, adding to his already significant burden of grief and loss in the early 16th century.